Bad mood alert. Bad mood alert.
Uh-oh.
That alert's been going off quite a bit this week.
Oh, okay.
No, with me, with the
Oh,
St. John household.
gotcha. I thought you meant me. I was like, that.
No. I've been very familiar with that alert.
Well, next 4 hours should be just fine for you then.
I had, one of my daughters sounded that alert last night.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe there's a very large dog named Coco that has been sounding that alert since 3:30 a.m. So,
What's wrong with Coco?
well,
Mad the Jayhawks won't guard anybody?
If you'd like to talk to her and find out, I'd love it. So, if someone can decipher that, let me know. Yeah, no, I didn't mean you. I meant just, in my life, that those bells have been sounded at me a lot. Although, all the bad mood alerts last night all changed with a simple text message of no school. So,
Yeah, I was curious when you said bad mood because I thought that usually brings instant happiness.
Well, one of the reasons that came late because there's a certain time, like the night before, if they don't call it, they ain't going to call it. Made it seem like they weren't going to call it. And then we were also, shopping online for a bedroom set for I don't know how that sounds to you, but it wasn't overly pleasurable.
It doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
It's just, I was just being yelled at. That's all.
Yeah.
I said, hey, I just all I want to do is buy this and let's move on. And so, buying beds, it's fun.
Oh, yeah. Furniture shopping of any kind is really enjoyable.
Right. Does it need a box spring or not? Can please tell me? Well, I don't know. It did need a box spring, by the way.
Always.
So that adds to the price. I don't know if you realize that. Yeah. I don't blame you. I don't blame you for being in a bad mood. We talked about this yesterday, Jake. So I anticipated it when I saw that game last night. Because that was, what's the word here? Excessive? It's one thing to lose that game, but as you heard the broadcast crew talking about the way they lost it, that ties for the worst loss in the Bill Self era. 91-57. BYU dismantles Kansas. 91-57. 34 points, tied for the worst loss under Bill Self. And that's the third worst defeat in program history. In 2021, Kansas also lost by 34 to USC in the NCAA tournament. Now, this, maybe you guys probably know this, since did you watch both games in their entirety, Utah and BYU?
I did not watch last night in its entirety. I
No.
turned it off in the second half.
8 minutes
Well,
left.
I mean, then you would have it wouldn't change this. You would have this knowledge anyway. The defeat also meant that Kansas, who lost to Utah 74-67 on Saturday, they have not led through their past 80 minutes of basketball.
Mm.
Yeah.
Huh.
They suffered back-to-back losses for the first time this season in conference play. But they haven't led through their past 80 minutes of basketball.
That's right.
So you knew that.
I did.
Nate did So Nate didn't know that.
No.
No, I read
That's
that.
wild.
I read
That's
that this
wild.
morning. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's the yikes.
I read a stat this morning that out of all their losses this year, 9 losses, 7 of those they've trailed by at least double digits in the first half. Like I feel like the most famous loss was the one where they blew the lead at the very end against Houston, but most of the losses.
I don't know that or Baylor.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a 19-point lead at halftime.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know which is. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, the way they lost to Houston, that was heartbreaking.
Like a 6-point lead with 18 seconds left and shooting free throws.
That's heartbreaking.
That's the worst,
that almost seems impossible. I mean, like I've seen teams lose.
Home.
Yeah.
It was at home, and it was to Houston.
And I've seen teams blow 19-point leads before. 6-point lead with 18 seconds to go and shooting free throws.
You have some options out there.
Yeah, you do. It's true. And then they how much did they lose the Baylor game by?
Oh,
that was the thing. Like they lost by double digits.
Like 12.
So when
That's something when you have like a healthy argument over which is the worst loss.
Well, do you want to take on this, Stephen?
I mean, I don't know. Like, what am I? How am I gonna? What do you want me to tell you? According to ESPN research, this is the 7th loss of the season for Kansas as a ranked team playing an unranked opponent. Which leads you to ask the question:
why are they still ranked?
How long are they going to keep ranking Kansas?
They won't.
Not after this weekend, I wouldn't think.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're 23rd and 25 going into this week, so after these 2 losses.
Oh, there'll still be some people put them at 25 anyway.
They won't be ranked. And I'm a
gambling
man, and I'd gamble a lot on it.
When they revealed the top 16, somehow they were still in it.
Well, it's before they got battered their heads in and lost 2 games in a row on the road to far less teams. Well, hard to say that.
I don't know if Utah is. I don't know if you can say that about BYU. They got NBA players. So that's tied for the program's most such losses in a season in the Associated Press poll era, which began in 1948. So that's something. This also marked the first time Kansas lost by 30-plus points against an unranked team since the poll began in 1948. And you got former players that are taking to social media.
Yeah. Well,
see what Cole Aldrich said?
Oh, I didn't see that. No, I haven't seen that yet.
I was too busy reading the message boards.
Oh, boy.
Cole Aldrich said, put the managers in. Maybe they care.
I actually was thinking that in the second half. Like, why are we not
put the managers in?
Playing the walk-ons? Oh. I mean, not the managers, but I really was. I was like, why not? If you're Bill Self and you're watching this effort, why not play the walk-ons? I'm sure they at least want to be there. Because a lot of the players that were playing in the game, that was one of the most piss poor efforts I've ever seen from a Kansas basketball team. There are guys out there that are, and I don't remember who it was that was doing the color commentary of the game on television, but I respect that man because he called it out several times. He's like, look at this defense or lack thereof. They're not even trying. It's one thing when you have limitations on your team because you can't shoot or you don't have the athletes to keep up with guys or whatever the case might be. They're not closing people out. They're just not even bothering to get hands up on shooters. They're or trying to rush out to close somebody out when they're shooting a wide open 3 or rotate. Or when the ball's on the ground, diving after the loose ball. I'm not trying to pick on one guy because it's certainly not one person, but that Store, there were a couple times where it's just his guy just pulled up and shot, and he just kind of stood there. And then there was a play in the second half where there was a loose ball between him and a guy from BYU right on the baseline, The guy from BYU gets on the ground after it right away, and Storr kind of tries to bend over and pick it up. He doesn't dive on the ground after it. To me, that's probably the biggest indicator right there of any, who actually wants something more. It was like that time, remember, I never got over the time that
Wichita State?
In Wichita State game, that Van Vliet versus Oubre. And Van Vliet's diving on the floor, and Oubre's like kind of casually picks over to try to, maybe I'll at least bother to bend over.
That was after you had your run-in with Greg Marshall, too, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
It was. That was an unforgettable weekend.
That's why you don't forget that.
But it's also, and I say this as a compliment to Bill Self, it stands out because, you just don't see that with Bill Self teams over the years. One of the things that made him so ridiculously successful for so long was not only did they have a ton of talent, they had guys that were outworking the other team, even when they were more talented. And that last night, that was a team whose culture is broken.
Look, that was the money quote that you sent us. Said a lot, and it was.
Yep.
It was very. Obviously, it's damning for him to say these things, but it's also it's correct. Nate sent us his quote from Jayhawk Slant from Bill Self. It said, "We need to get away from each other." I'll tell you that point blank. I thought this would be a great opportunity to be a team bonding situation, but it hasn't been. It hasn't been a good trip. Guys need to get home. We'll probably get home around 5 in the morning and get away from us for a day. Then let's regroup on Thursday and start looking at some things that we could do to be more connected and more intangible-oriented team. When we play with intangibles, that leads to playing to athleticism, which leads to toughness, which leads to playing to connectivity and a lot of things. It's telling you right there, and they're not doing all of the little things, the intangibles, the toughness, the hustle, the defense, all the things that over the years have become signatures of Bill Self-coached teams. And when you don't do that, then athleticism and talent doesn't mean anywhere near as much. It's not enough. It's not enough. And on top of that, and this is not an excuse, this is just the truth of what we are dealing with in college basketball. It's a lot harder, it's a lot riskier, it's a lot more of a gamble when you're bringing new players in from other programs that have been developed or partially developed in other programs that maybe haven't been developed with those same principles, to bring them in and bring all these new pieces together and try to force them together and jam them together, and it's not going to work every time. It's just not. And again, you can look at Missouri as a perfect example. Again, year one, it worked under Dennis Gates. Yes, he had a couple of injuries, big injuries to deal with year two, but clearly some of the pieces that he selected, that he put together, it didn't work. It didn't work. Even if Tanji and Grill would have been healthy, they were not going to be a tournament team. They were going to take a big step back. This year, it's worked way better than anyone could have thought. And one of the reasons why Mizzou is really good this year, it's not because they're deep and they're talented. Don't get me wrong. But when you watch them play, Jake, you've watched them enough, haven't you? I don't know if Nate's watched them. Nate hasn't probably taken a minute out of his life to watch Mizzou basketball. But Jake does, because Jake's a heavy gambler.
And you know what? I'm a Mark Mitchell fan.
Right, but like when you watch that, good job. That's who I was going to bring up.
Of course.
Like
I love
when
that
you watch
guy.
him.
I love the way he plays.
He does. That team does all those little things, right?
Oh yeah.
They're diving after the basketball. They're defending you. They're playing fast.
Well, they're tough.
They're tough. They're playing hard. You always. I like to listen to what other coaches say about the team after they play him, whether they win or lose. And every coach has said the same. They've been over the top in the praise of how they play, the chemistry that's been built. You watch the post-game interviews. You watch how they've been able to overcome tough losses and bounce back and be able to not let one or two losses become three. They haven't had any, losing streaks. They had those 2 games where they lost in a row and they bounced back wonderfully. He not only did he get the talent right, but he got the chemistry right. But that's not always going to happen. Like K-State, the jury's still out if they got it right this year. Probably not now, after they got swept in Utah. The answer, if they don't make the NCAA tournament, they didn't get it right. They didn't get it right. And it's hard. That's going to be a tough deal for all coaches. It's not just about collecting talent. It's about collecting the right talent that fits together the right way, that plays the way you want them to play. And clearly, he got some talented players that aren't living up to expectations, that aren't playing the way he wants them to play Kansas basketball, and that aren't fitting in the right way. Was that fair to say?
Yeah.
Now that's not it, but this is. I'm telling you, man, that college, it's going to be more of a crapshoot like this every year in college basketball.
Yep.
It just is. Because that's free agency, man.
And unlimited free agency.
And it's new. It's brand new. And so you don't have any kind of system to go by. You don't have any past experience it's brand new to everybody.
Yeah, what works and doesn't work.
Yeah, there's a brand new way of going about how you run a program.
Some coaches are going to be better at it than others, and there's not enough proof, there's not enough evidence to know exactly who it is. It's only been a couple of years, We're getting a pretty good idea, but it's changed the landscape of college basketball. Jake, you've got that full quote?
I do.
I want to hear it because it's better to hear the tone and everything else. This is Bill Self after the blowout loss at BYU last night.
Well, the thing about we need to regroup, get away from each other for a day and go home and hopefully be able to, a lot of times with teams, there needs to be something happen to pull everybody together that is us against the outside. And, we're going to have an opportunity to do that for sure. So a lot of teams go through it. We just haven't been through it much at all in a long time. So, but certainly we're going to go through it this time. So all we have of each other, and we're going to have to be strong for each other and be good teammates and good leaders and understand that, it's if we need to look in the mirror, all of us, and what can we do to change the momentum. And then whatever we commit to doing, then do it. And tonight we were 1 foot in, 1 foot out in how we guarded and a lot of other things right from the jump. I mean, it was crystal clear how we wanted to try to guard them, and right from the jump we doubted it and ended up hurting ourselves right there early.
He went on to say, right now our intangibles aren't where they need to be, which leads to looking a step slow, which leads to being on an island, which leads to poor communication, leads to a lot of different things. Certainly, we've got to tighten that stuff up before we actually say we're guarding something wrong, we're not running something right. When you don't run something, when you're not connected, it's never going to look good. We've got to tighten that up first. So he's saying, look, if they're not going to go out and play the way we want them to play, if they're not going to play connected as a team, doing all of you roll your eyes all you want, the intangibles and all the little things, then none of the other stuff matters. Like he was talking about right from the beginning, you could tell it wasn't going to be good. And so that's a I don't know how you fix that at this point in the season. I don't know.
I mean,
if you can't trust that they're going to play with the right intangibles, on February 19th? I don't know.
I don't think it's reasonable to expect it to happen at this point. That doesn't mean it can't. I think, like when Self said, usually you need to have something happen to make it us against everybody else. And we've certainly got the opportunity to do that. I think he was hoping this was going to be the trip. You know, you go on this 5-day trip, it's almost like a retreat. Hey, guys, let's all get together. It's just us here in Utah. Let's all bond. Let's all get together. And instead, it's gone the opposite direction for whatever reason. So this late in the season, to think or expect that it's all of a sudden going to happen now is going against the odds. That doesn't mean it can't. I mean, we saw K-State go from losing 6 to winning 6. Sometimes all it takes is a good thing to happen. Maybe they have a night at, the famous thing that happened when they won the national championship in 2008 was they were kind of having a tough time as teammates, and they went to like Henry T's and had wings one night, and that supposedly was the night they all got on the same page, and then they flew from there. I'm not expecting some magic moment like that to happen with this team this year. But it's like the only hope that they have of still doing something in the postseason this year is something like that happening, because it's they're not, like, their culture's broken right now. That doesn't mean it can't be fixed. Things that are broken can be fixed, but
it's a long shot.
But it's a long shot, yeah. I mean, it's broken.
And the problem is, for timing right now, you won't find anything out over the next 2 games, because here I said that talent's not enough. Talent is enough to beat Oklahoma State in Lawrence and win at Colorado. They could win both of those games and look fine doing it, and we won't know what was fixed. You won't know what was fixed until Texas Tech, at Houston, Arizona.
And they might not win these next 2 games.
Now that would be a disaster. Oklahoma State's 4-10 in conference, and Colorado's 1-14.
Yeah, that would be a collapse of biblical proportions.
Well, they just made history last night.
Well, yes. Well, that would trump, losing those 2 games would trump what happened last night.
Yeah,
if
they lost at home to Oklahoma State.
I'm just saying they might not win them both. I'm not saying not predicting them to lose both, but how could you take anything for granted right now with the way they performed last night?
But if they win them, there's nothing you can see from those 2 games. Like, okay, all right, we got it. You know what I mean?
I mean, the only thing you could see is if there's extreme effort and they went out from the first minute to the last minute and just played their asses off.
Yeah, and maybe they can build some chemistry. Maybe they can build some positive vibes. Like,
I mean,
if they win a couple games.
If you see a difference in their effort and they're not just rolling the ball out and these games aren't close. I mean, you could see a change in the attitude. I think you could take something from that if you saw what we haven't been seeing pretty much all year.
I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but I mean, if things fell apart like in those last 3 games, like here's what I'll say. This is what I think. They're not going to lose to Oklahoma State. They're not going to lose at Colorado, and they're not going to win. And they're not going to win at Houston. I'll be like, those 3 outcomes are predetermined. The 2 that are up in the air: home against Texas Tech and home against Arizona. Okay, if you turn things around, you can finish 4-1. Then you're 12-8, and you're probably going to finish 5th or 6th. You have to play on Wednesday of the Big 12 tournament, and there you go. If things get away from you and things get bad, and you go, I don't know, 3-2. 2-3. I don't think they go 2-3. 3-2. I mean, I don't think they can, but I mean, they're like right now they're 4 or 5. They're tied for 6 with 2 other teams. They're tied with Baylor and TCU at 8 and 7, and then Utah and K-State are right behind them at 7 and 8. Like if things fell apart, worst case scenario, they could be playing on Tuesday. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's on the board, you know. Those 3 games to end the season are not easy. It's wild that we're even talking about that, but there it is. Oh, by the way, Jake, you see ESPN.com made a story out of what I was talking about yesterday with the Lawrence Police Department's X account firing off insults at K-State.
I imagine it's pretty quiet this morning. Imagine they're sticking to police business this morning.
Made ESPN.com. I'd like to think I'm
or maybe they got a call from Provo that there was an absolute murdering going on.
Wow.
They need to investigate. Acts of violence.
Yowza! All right, we'll take a break. Kansas, what?
A text thread that I'm on with some KU buddies. Somebody sent that Lawrence Police Department, and the first response was, These things are a lot funnier when we don't suck. That was before the game.
Well, BYU beats Kansas 91-57. We will take a break. Back after this on WHB. Welcome back to New Day with SSJ. All right, we're going to back off Jake and Nate, let them take a breath from talking about Kansas getting blown out at BYU 91-57.
Thought we were fairly nice about that.
What do you mean?
I mean, they need to be called out. I mean, that team does.
You got a microphone, buddy.
No, I know.
If you want to,
I'm trying to
there's
digest.
something that you didn't get off your chest, please do.
I don't know.
Say it. If there's something that needs to be said, say it.
I mean, we're not in the arena of college athletics anymore. I mean, these guys are pros, and to have an effort like that when you're paying guys, I mean, that's embarrassing. That was, I mean, gutless. To be, I mean, you borderline hesitate to say that call players quitters, but that last night looked like a bunch of quitters. That looked like a team of quitters. And I hate saying that as a former college athlete, not being in the locker room, not being in the building, but watching it on TV and listening to it on right here on Sports Radio 810. Because I turned on Gurley and Brian Haney just to hear what they were saying. But that was last night. That was an effort from a bunch of quitters. And that sucks, rooting for a team that for my entire life, and seeing an effort like that, and it's embarrassing. It's an utter embarrassment, and it's hard not to just quit as a Kansas fan right now. Just be like, all right, this season can't get done long enough, and that sucks. That really sucks. I've never felt like that ever before.
I'm trying to think of a time when I have, as a KU fan, felt like the team's not invested. They don't seem to care that much, and we know it's in there. Like, I saw them. The last game I went to was the game at home against Arizona State. In the second half of that game, they were incredible defensively. So it's there. Like, they had it in them. And that's almost makes it worse.
Right.
Like, if they were just bad.
Right.
Well,
But
they're
this team,
trying hard, but they're bad.
They have enough talent to beat Duke, to beat Michigan State.
Yeah.
And maybe
to beat Iowa State.
Yeah.
Recently.
Yes.
To have a 6-point lead against Houston. To watch them go out and play with no pride. That, like you said, like, it's hard not to quit on the team. Like last night, it was 10 minutes into the second half, and I'm like, why am I still watching this? And this will surprise you, Jake, but I switched over to some soccer.
Yeah, I bet you did. I bet you did.
There was a game in Colorado being played in the freezing cold, and I decided I'd rather watch that because this is.
I was so angry at halftime. Went out and started shoveling my driveway again. I literally did. I put on my headphones and I turned on, listened to the halftime show on our 810 app, and I started shoveling my freaking driveway. I mean, 9 o'clock at night. That's how angry I was.
I finished the OJ documentary on Netflix, which is fantastic.
I also did watch some of the Saturday Night Live special. That cheered me up a little
bit. Anyways,
yeah,
I know we're gonna get to Dennis Gates. I thought that coming off that I felt like we were pretty nice that first segment, and I felt like being an a-hole because that's what it deserved.
Well,
there it is.
I think that you're echoing the sentiments of a lot of Kansas fans right now.
And I'll be in the building next weekend. I mean, I'm going to watch them play Texas Tech, so hopefully they can figure something out in the next week. And that's. Hey, I trust Bill Self. I feel bad for him, honestly. So I do. I feel bad for him.
I was every once in a while they would show him on the bench after a play. And he didn't even look mad because I think he's just like.
There's a level of shock.
So many times you can call a timeout and yell at everybody.
I mean, they didn't even grant him. He tried to call a timeout to stop a run.
I think you guys make a great point. It is a big game between number 15 Missouri and number 4 Alabama.
That's right.
And I'm looking forward to it. SEC Network at 8 o'clock. What a big opportunity game for Mizzou at home to take on a very talented Alabama team. If Mizzou can win the game, then they would be only a game behind Alabama in the standings, as Alabama's 10-2 in the SEC. Mizzou is 8-4. Mizzou trying to get into the top 4 to get that double bye. Dennis Gates was on with an old favorite of Jake's, Jim Rome, yesterday. So we have a clip of that. Jim Rome talks to Dennis Gates here about being picked to finish 13th in the SEC preseason poll, but now has Mizzou at number 15 in the AP poll. Here is Dennis Gates on Jim Rome talking about how Mizzou has defied outside expectations this season.
At this point of the year, what stands out to you the most about this season, and what do you appreciate the most about this group?
Well, what stands out is this, that we've been on a gradual climb. Obviously, 15 weeks ago was preseason. We wasn't ranked in any publication to do anything. And we talked about it this summer that we have to be on this slow climb without spiking too early or getting behind ourselves or down. And this week, 15th week, it just happens we're ranked number 15 in the AP poll. We're number 15 in Ken Palm. We're number 16 in the net rankings, and our team is progressing in a direction that we are wanting to spike into. So I'm just thankful our guys are allowing me to coach them with my heart and their hearts. So we're connected in a different way, and they truly love each other. I truly love them. They love me. And we just want each other to be successful the best way possible.
We were talking to Dennis Gates. A couple of things I want to ask you about in response to that. But when you mentioned that we were not ranked anywhere in the preseason, just to add a little clarity to this, what you were actually picked was to finish 13th in the SEC preseason media poll. Dennis, we all know the media doesn't know anything about anything. However, you had a better idea of what you had, but did you know you had this? For instance, what were your personal expectations for this group coming into the season?
Well, we're still on track to those personal expectations, but in June, we talked about a trip to San Antonio in April, and that's where the Final Four is. That's where the national championship is won. That's where you can cut down some nets and have fun and a little bit of confetti. So we talked about that moment as our destination, but what we fall in love with is the journey that gets us there, the hard work, dedication. You got to roll your sleeves up. You got to be connected while doing it. And ultimately, you got to share the successes while also stopping and limiting all distractions out there from family, friends, loved ones, and even from your success. And we've just protected our locker room a certain way.
Okay, so he used a word twice that Bill Self used a couple of times. What word is that? When I read the quotes, I read this word a couple of times that Bill Self used. Connected. Right?
Yeah.
Bill Self said that they're not connected. They need to be connected for anything else to work, for anything else to matter. And what did Gates say there a couple of times? That we're connected in a different way. We're connected. They love me. I love them. We're connected. And that's part of it. That's another way of having, of explaining, a certain level of chemistry, right? And that's what makes teams special, when they're talented, when they're well coached, but also when they're connected. That's what Bill Self's trying to explain. What's wrong with Kansas, and that's what Dennis Gates used that word to try to explain what's right with Missouri. I mean, it's very interesting that both coaches use that word to describe what's going on with their basketball teams.
The sport of basketball is a really, really, really fun sport to play when you're connected. When guys are sharing the basketball, guys are supporting one another, communicating with each other, because it's a free-flowing sport. It's not a sport where it's not like it's baseball. You don't necessarily have to be connected to play. It's more fun if you are, but you're not. It's not it's a one-on-one matchup at all times. That depends on where the ball goes. Basketball is a sport that is a free-flowing sport that requires that connectivity that you're talking about, and it's so fun to play when everybody's on the same page and they know they're going to share the basketball with each other and they know that they are going to support each other. But when you're disconnected, it's a miserable game to play. You run down the court and you don't even think you're going to get the ball. You know, and you don't think that if you get beat, you've got a teammate that's going to step up and stop your driver from getting to the basket. All those things. It's and you can tell one team that we're talking about today is having fun playing together because they're connected, and one team's not.
All that said, this game is gonna be a hell of a game. It's gonna be very difficult to beat Alabama. Alabama is number 4 in the nation. They're coming off that loss to Auburn. I mean, Auburn's the best team in the nation. Like,
yeah,
Mike DeCourcy has been. That's no like big revelation. Mike DeCourcy has been pounding that drum all season long. But I mean, Alabama, they beat Illinois in the non-con. They beat Houston in the non-con. I mean, the only losses they have in conference that lost to Auburn, and they lost against Ole Miss. The only other 2 losses were at Purdue and Oregon in the non-con. They're 21-4. They're 10-2 in the conference. They were in the Final Four last year. Stacked with talent. But look, I mean, Mizzou, they've held their own against everybody. You know, that first loss, that first game, that loss at Memphis, they had a double-digit lead. They let it slip away, but, you know, they lost by 3 to Illinois and had a game-tying three-pointer in the air, and it just didn't go in. Now, they got worked at Auburn, but that's what happens a lot when you play at Auburn. You know, they had a bad game. They did not play well at Texas, and they still had a lead with 5 minutes left. And then they had those back-to-back losses where they lost at Tennessee by 4, and they lost at home against Texas A&M, a top 10 team that beat them with a three-pointer with 1.8 seconds left. But they've won on the road. They have the marquee win at Florida. They blew out Mississippi State at Mississippi State. They just beat Georgia, a bubble team at Georgia, and won by double digits. You know, we saw them play so well against Kansas in the non-con, and so there's still some questions about them because that first game at Memphis they lost, and then they had a long list of games against teams they should beat. But man, I remember that game against California, the game they played before Kansas, where they were getting blown out, and it was that. And my infamous text to Gabe at halftime of that, Gabe DeArmond at halftime of that game. Why do they suck? And then they were hell on wheels in the second half, and they were unbelievable, and they beat Cal, and that really propelled them to the next game against Kansas, and they've been a very, very consistent team. They have not had the only time they've had back-to-back losses we just saw at Tennessee and then home against A&M, and they've responded with 2 blowout victories over Oklahoma and at Georgia. And so this game against Alabama is huge. And if they can win this game against Alabama, they'd have a real good shot to finish them in the top 4 and getting the double bye in what has been described as the best conference ever, as far as strength and number of ranked teams and everything else. So this is gonna be great. And if they lose to Alabama, I mean, look, there's no shame in losing to Alabama. Like I said, Final Four team and a team that looks like they could be a 1 seed and on the way to another Final Four. But there's every reason to believe, especially Mizzou, that they can hang with them. Like you said, Mark Mitchell, Caleb Grill, I mean, Tamar Bates. And that's the other cool thing. You guys have experienced this with great success over the past few years. It just adds that little something else. So there's some Kansas City guys on there, right? And so guys like Tamar Bates and Mark Mitchell and Aiden Shaw, that's awesome. So it's great for Kansas City basketball. It's great for Mizzou basketball. 8 o'clock tonight. Jake, you've expressed your admiration for Mark Mitchell and the way this Mizzou team plays. What are your thoughts on Mizzou favored by 1.5 tonight against the Crimson Tide.
Wow, that's says a lot. I think
What do you say about it?
1.5. Lay it.
Yeah.
Lay it. It's the old Joplin
Is that
turnaround.
What did you think it was going to be?
I thought Alabama might be favored by a bucket.
Mizzou by 1.5, and the over/under's 169.5.
I don't mess with basketball over and unders.
Don't you?
No, not really.
Man, this is a big game. And look, I took a year off from any type of big games, fellas. So
You took a year off of wins in
yeah,
the
I'm
SEC.
just, yeah, took a year off. I'm just glad to be back.
You're rested and ready for this.
I'm very appreciative of being active in this college basketball season and having something to look forward to. I'm not taking that for granted. You know?
It's crazy how good the SEC is, man. It is crazy.
Now, look, last night, A&M, number 17 in the nation, they lost by 16 at Mississippi State. And Mizzou went to Mississippi State and blew them out, but they lost at home to A&M. So
I would just like to respond to one thing that Jim Rome said, though. The media doesn't know anything. Yeah, well, neither do the coaches.
Wow.
I talk to coaches about that when they have to turn in their poll. How many of them actually vote, first of all? None of us know before the season starts what any of these teams are going to be. Use the coaches' poll. They're just as dumb as we are.
That's the SID poll, buddy.
We don't know anything.
Those coaches don't vote.
I just like to characterize like these media guys that run around act like they know everything. They hand you a ballot and you fill it out.
Like, especially now, how in the hell are you supposed to predict what happens in a college basketball conference with all the turnover now on the rosters? You're just guessing.
Yeah. I talked to coaches about it. They're like, this is the most ridiculous thing ever. I have no idea what half the teams even have in my conference.
Well, on that note, let's get another guy that has no idea what he's talking about. Mike Boddicker up next on Sports Radio 810 WHB.